All right, so the first one, how important is the ranking, prestige of the college you go to? Why do people make it a big deal if it's not? Well, I found this article about 10 or 12 years ago. It was in the Washington Post with a listing of all kinds of famous people and where they all went to college, right? And at that point, it was a listing of X number of members of the Senate went to this college, X number of people in the House of Representatives went to that college, these famous people went to these colleges, etc. And you'd be surprised, I still have the article. It was a huge list of people from colleges all over the map, from the usual suspects. The Ivy Leagues had their share, okay? But also, there were a lot of people from a lot of the big universities from across the country, a lot of small schools that people had not heard of. They're all on the list. So it ends up with, what you make of your life has more to do with how you spend your time and what you're devoted to than it has to do with where you went to school. Can that help? Sure. And I think we're getting even more name brand obsessed than ever. But I think it's less of a big deal, particularly for undergraduate school, than people make it out to be. And if you think it's that big a deal, just look at the list of schools of the people who ran the world economy into the ground and where they all went to school. Okay, so I don't put too much credence in that, because I'm sure that list is top heavy with all the prestigious schools. All right, I hope that didn't sound too nasty. What's the best decision of my life? I think the first thing that comes to mind is that I decided to become a teacher, because I had worked in the private sector until I was in my early 30s and realized that it was not for me. And so I think it made my life better. By extension, it made my wife and family's life better, because I'm a much happier person. I ended up getting to spend a lot more time with my kids as they grew up. And I also feel like what I'm doing has some value in society, and that it plays to my strengths. Just overall better choice for me than to be out just chasing a buck. Let's see. What's your best relationship advice? Let's see. I think you should trust that you have attraction and someone is attracted to you at the same time. That's a beautiful thing, but don't let yourself end up being defined too much by the other person or the other person's expectations. I think that can be very limiting. So yeah, don't be too defined by what the other person's expectations are of you. So stay yourself. Let's see. Who's your favorite writer? Man, that is a tough one. But I mean, the first one that comes to mind, who really just gives me a jolt whenever I read, is Tom Wolfe. He's kind of a pyrotechnic writer, a little bit of a show-off. He gets real specific about the kind of things that interest me, and so I really like him, and I recommend Bonfire of the Vanities to just about anybody. Likewise, a lot of his nonfiction work, going back to the electric Kool-Aid acid test and all those kinds of things. Those are good reading. One of the best things I haven't used it in class in a while. It's in our lit book. Was a piece he did as part of the Right Stuff about what it's like to land on an aircraft carrier. And it's just so well done. It captures the people and what it's like almost to be there. It's really good. He did another great one that I used to use in American Lit with some guys who didn't like to read, about stock car racing, about the likes of Junior Johnson and those guys who got to be such good drivers because they were bootleggers who were running from the cops in the mountains of North Carolina. Okay, so yeah, Tom Wolfe, I can pick him up any old time and read it. Some of his later novels kind of suck, but I still like him a lot. And there are others, and I'm sure if anyone hears me say this, I'll get grief from my coworkers who are literary snobs, but who cares? I got no use these for snubs anyway. Let's see. What was your craziest college experience? Wow. Craziest one that comes to mind. I did a college mission trip down to Peru, and we worked in this mountainous desert town. It's on the Pacific Ocean, but here's a little trivia given the way it falls. It's Eastern Standard Time, and it's the Pacific Ocean. But anyway, we were 40 miles south of Lima, working on a number of different things, an irrigation project and then a medical study and getting information from lots of people. But yeah, we're 40 miles south of Lima. Lima's a big city of millions of people, and we could go up there on the weekends. And so a bunch of us went up there and we stayed at a hostel in town. We had gone out in what was called the Miraflores district, and then out dancing and carrying on, and it was a good time. But then we got back to the hostel, and it was about 4 stories up, and we're on the rooftop. We're just kind of hanging out, overlooking things, and we watched, me and a couple other guys, we watched, this was in the middle of a short city block. To our left, we saw like a whole mob of kids. They must have been 9, 10, 11 years old, a bunch of little dudes, right? They come along, and it's just like 2 or 3 in the morning. They're coming along, and then a couple of them peel out, and they run to the corner here, all right, at the other block. Some of them stayed there, and the rest of them went, and they identified a vehicle, and they targeted, they swarmed this vehicle, right, and they ended up breaking into it, and then 2 or 3 of them got in and started monkeying around, and they popped the hood and they started fooling around with it, and they started it up, all right, and then they slammed the hood, and the guys from this end came running, and they jumped in, and then they kind of backed out, and they bumped into one of the cars that had been parallel parked. They bumped into another, and these other 2 dudes who were at this end of the street kind of dove in. You'd swear it was a Hollywood movie. They dove in. So there must have been like 7 or 8 guys piled into what was like a little Toyota Corolla or something, and they took off joyriding. And so that was pretty wild. Anything else that is wild would be not school appropriate, so I'm not going there. Right? Knew that much. So yeah, that was wild. It gave me, it was very much an eye-opener for how people were living there. All right, let's see, I'm carrying on here. I usually don't like to talk this long because I feel like I'm boring and should shut up. Let's see. Why are high school kids obsessed with tragedy? Why do they write about it all the time? I don't know, I think we're drawn to darkness, and people have pain in their lives and encounter things, and I think it's a way of knowing that you're not alone. I mean, why do we slow down and look at accidents on the highway? That's part of life. Even if you haven't lived through it, it's out there, and you tend to look. The older I get, the less I look, because I think the older you get, the more you've lived through things and challenges, and so yeah, I think that's something that kids, it's part of grown-up life, is having to face a lot of that pain, face dark things. What's my mother like? My mother is 75. She was a nurse for 50 plus years. Many of those years in New York City at a variety of places, and she is funny and she is tough, and she's a riot, and she's got that serious Queens girl accent. So when my kids imitate her, it was really funny when my daughter was small. She would imitate grandma, and we got some laughs on that one. But yeah, she's a wonderful, big-hearted person. She raised 4 boys who were all good, productive citizens on the right side of the law, and yeah, she's good. She's really funny too. Who would win in a fight, Batman or Superman? Really? Here, my English class, you have to ask Batman or Superman. Superman would crush him. Just period. End of report. What is your go-to jam song? All right, so if I get in the car and I want to put the windows down and crank it up a little bit and maybe maybe wink at the local speed limits, at least on the highway. I play it safe on the roads, but on the highway, Jack, I'll put on a little Badlands and crank up the bass on that a little bit. That's a good song. Try it on for size. It's old though. It's probably too old for you. After you graduate college, is it scary being a real adult with taxes and a job and everything? Of course it is. Of course it is. However, here's what you have going for you, okay? Just look around, okay? Think of all the jokers who have gone before you and have done just fine, okay? You will grow into these demands. You'll have no problems with these things, okay? Yeah, I used to wonder that, gosh, how am I going to go away and go to school and do this? How am I going to get through this? What am I going to do when I got a kid come along? And everyone gets through it. You have more, you're more resourceful than you could ever imagine. However much we may infantilize you in high school, you do a lot of growing up when you leave the confines of Cornell Road here, and you're very, very capable of acting like grown-ups and being successful. Let's see. Why is it important to read and understand literature, to be able to think clearly and to learn to write coherently? Oof. How much time do we have? Why is it important to read and understand literature? Well, I think that's probably the biggie. I think the other things are fairly obvious, but why do we have to read and understand literature? Well, it kills me these days that kids read less and less. And I could say anecdotally in the time I've been teaching, I started here in '99, I think kids read a lot less literature. I've heard all this stuff about reading online and etc. But I think that's different than picking up a book and being transported to another time and place and learning about people, how they're like you or how they may be different from you, or both at the same time, in a way that other media can't do for you. Plus, I think it makes you slow down, it makes you more contemplative, it makes you just a little bit sharper. I find to have those things to fall back on. I think some of the science is now coming around to show that. I post a couple of those things each year that come out that they show what people who read literature, what parts of their brains are activated more, and they tend to be more compassionate, etc., things like that. So it's not just a bunch of people saying you need to read more, but in the long run, it's going to be better for you, and it's better for your capacities. As far as thinking clearly and learning to write coherently, thinking clearly. I mean, we live in very busy times. We're bombarded with messages all the time, conflicting messages that are true, messages that are patently false but painted as true. You have to learn to be really discerning, and you have to have a BS detector. And I think by reading more, thinking more, and learning to write, you're better able to discern when someone's trying to get over on you. I mean, just look at all the nonsense that we've been pounded with here recently as election day approaches. Who knows what's true? Who knows? Come on. Oh, they're playing a sad music. I'm supposed to feel sad here now. Or you have to be discriminating about how you consume these things. And part of learning how to do those things is learning to appreciate what the people are doing who write those things, how they're constructing messages. I think that's all part of literature and thinking clearly and learning to write coherently. Because as a coherent writer, you can learn, what kind of response you're trying to elicit from whoever's reading what you're writing. So, I think I need to be tapping out here shortly. Let's see. What is adulthood, and are we 18-year-olds anything close to it? Yeah, I think you're closer than you realize. Adulthood seems to me to be when you realize that the world doesn't revolve around you, when you realize that you're living for yourself, but you're also living for other people, and that you have responsibilities to them, and that when you wake up in the morning, yeah, you're thinking about taking care of number one and taking care of business, but you're also thinking about what can you do for others as well. And so I think that's part of being a responsible adult.